Hello, my name is Debbie, Owl and Gator Stitcher. Welcome to Flosstube number 12. Today is Wednesday, June 23rd, 2021. This is a channel primarily about cross stitch, but a little bit about what I'm reading and watching and life thrown in. A happy belated Father's Day to all of you who identify as fathers. I was really fortunate. I got to have brunch with my parents and spend time with them on Father's Day. They live in a retirement community, and this was the first time in over a year and a half that they have opened up the facility to allow outside guests to a formal event in their dining room. So my parents are in the independent living of their retirement community. They have a full kitchen in their two-bedroom apartment, but they also have a dining room facility that they can use at any time. But because of COVID, there weren't any guests allowed, and they are finally allowing guests back into the dining room. So it was really nice. Obviously, I spend time with my parents, but also just to know that they are able to sort of get back to life as normal. I've also done a lot of stitching over the past couple of weeks, and I'll share all of that with you in a couple of minutes. But before I do that, I would like to thank everyone who has subscribed to my video and to everyone who is watching. And to all of you who are new viewers, welcome. I hope that you will enjoy what you see and stick around. And a special thank you to everyone who has left comments. I really appreciate them. And I know in my last video, I expressed some hesitancy about some of the stitching decisions I had made, and a lot of you left a lot of really supportive comments, and I really, really appreciate that. So thank you. So I also, before I get into showing you my stitching, I also want to mention the Under 1000 Subs Club. This is for Flosstubers who have fewer than 1,000 subscribers, and just to get information out about their channels, and if you haven't watched them, go take a peek and see if it's something you might like, and hit the subscribe button if it's something that you do. It just, when you hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, it gives you additional benefits. I'm part of the Under 1000 Subs Club, but thank you to everyone who has taken the time to watch my videos. So the person who I would like to highlight this week is Nads X Stitch. She is based in the UK, and she has a lot of lovely, lovely projects that she's working on. She has a great variety. She's very active in a lot of the stitching groups like I am, and we are actually on the same, I guess, settlement, is, they don't use the word team, but settlement in one of the games, Survival of the Stitchiest. And it's just been a lot of fun to work with her, and I've been watching her videos for at least 6 months, because she's also one of the admins for the Letter of the Month Club, Letter of the Month Facebook group. And so I've been following her for quite a while, and it's great that we get to be in a Facebook team together. I don't know what else to call it. It's a settlement, but that sounds a bit weird. So if you haven't had a chance to watch her stuff, I highly encourage you to go check her out, and I will leave a link to her channel in the drop down box below. But let me go ahead and start to show you a lot of my stitching. So in the No New Starts 2021 Facebook group, while the main focus of that group is to encourage us to stitch what we've already started and not to have more starts, there are sort of pop-up challenges that come up along the way. And one of them was what they called a, I think, WIP days. Actually, that's not the name of it, but basically it's to see how many WIPs you can put in 100 stitches in a 24-hour period. You can pick whatever WIPs that you want, however you want to select them. Some people said they were going to choose projects they had not worked on yet this year. Other people may have, they have a fixed plan. They want to hit certain projects during the month, and they chose that. I chose to spin a wheel and pick projects based on that. So I'm going to go ahead and show you, and that was 2 weeks ago, and I meant to have this whole thing where I showed you the projects I spun on the wheel, and I totally forgot to do that in my last Flosstube video, but I can show you the results now. So the first one that I spun was this one. It's from an old magazine of just cross stitch and country crafts called it's Love One Another. So it's just sort of this simple pattern here, done on black Aida. I'm doing the lettering and the roses, but I'm not, this whole sort of border here is stitched, and I'm not doing that. Primarily because my Aida fabric wouldn't have left me space to do all of that. But I think the design looks fine without it. And so here's where I am now. So basically all I did was put in, I finished the green in the N and then put that little blob of green there, which is in the A for another. This is a very easy project to stitch. For the most part, it is a lot of block stitching. I mean, the letters obviously, if you look at the, the O, I mean, it's a lot of this, and then it's just sort of going around in different colors. There are occasional half stitches that you have to do, but they're fairly obvious where you do them. This is a project that I had started for the Magazine Monthly Challenge. The February theme was love, and so obviously love one another fits in really well with that. I will pick this up again in July because for the acrostic for the Magazine Monthly Challenge, the word is jolly, and so there's 2 L's in that, and so I think love one another will come out twice. So that I can get some good progress in that one, because that is a project that I'd like to finish this year. The next one that got called up on the wheel goes this way, Gone Batty by Brenda Gervais. I think many of you are familiar with this pattern. It came out a couple of years ago. I am doing this on a 28 count linen. I have the name of it written down, but it's not a company I ever heard something. It's a German company. And I'm stitching it 2/2 with called on threads. So here's where I am now. I just put in 100 stitches of the cat head, which was about 2 rows. This cat's got a big head. I've started to make the curve down on his head, but then his body is even bigger. So this is a cute stitch, but right now, because I'm stuck in all of that dark brown, it's kind of boring to stitch at times. But overall, I think it's a cute pattern, and I do enjoy working on that. The next one that got called up was Beach Dance by Lindy Stitches. And so here's where I am on that. I'm doing this is a 32 count even weave. I honestly don't know what company it is. It is an over dye fabric, but I don't remember the name of the fabric. But basically I just this is a black and white checked border, and I think all I did was, either the white or the black, I just carried along and did more stitches in the border. I just wanted something quick and easy to do on that one, and so that's what I chose to pick the easiest thing. But by doing all the boring things first, will be, that will leave the birds to do at the end, and that will be the fun part. The next one that I picked up, or the wheel spun, was Artecy White Owl, and this is artwork by Kayomi Harai, and I absolutely love this pattern. I love owls, obviously, by my Flosstube name, and also blue is one of my favorite colors, and so to have that beautiful dark sky and then that white owl in front of it is just gorgeous. So put my 100 stitches in. Again, I wanted something really easy, so this is a dark blue, I think like 820 or something, and just put stitches in there, went across. I do need to come back, and this is about the halfway point on the pattern. I do have, this is the previous page, you can see I have stitches that I need to fill in there, but I just wanted to get 100 stitches in to meet the challenge, and so I just went with what was easy. And then the last project I put stitches in for that particular challenge was Old World Map by Artecy. And this is the large version, so it is quite large. It's about 250,000 stitches. This one I did not spin the wheel. I was in the middle, like we had to do it within a 24-hour period, and it started at 5 o'clock our time, and I was in the middle of doing this one, so I said, okay, I'm just going to put 100 stitches in it, and then I started with the other projects. This is also my oldest project, and so I work on it quite a bit for magical stitches. If we have if we can't fit one of the prompts, we can just put the same number of stitches into our oldest project, and so sometimes when I just feel like that's what I want to do, even if I have something that meets the prompt, I will just pull this out and put in stitches on it, because I do want to make great progress. I also, for this, for Crystal Academy, we are picking our own projects, and for each spell, we have to, or we have to basically pick a project, and that is, we are mastering those spells. And so you pick your project, but then you have to put in stitches on it. And there's different levels, and if you get up to level 5, it means you put 750 stitches in within a 2-week period. Not a problem for me on this one whatsoever. So this time for that particular prompt, I've focused sort of on this area. So a little bit this banner here, I put some in here, and then just as those colors sort of came down in here, and then some of the dark browns, and this sort of 902, which is sort of a dark burgundy. So that's what I've been doing for Crystal Academy, but also just on my own. I started picking up some, there's, you know, this worked on this pink guy here. And the reason why I sort of do it like this is the moderators want to be able to see progress on your work. And if I took this whole photo and said, okay, guess where I put in 50 stitches, it would be too much. So I limit the picture space so they get a little bit more of a close-up. I still am doing this cross-country. It's not the easiest thing for them, but one of the moderators also does a lot of cross-country, and I think she's used to looking at, a lot of full coverage, and she is used to looking at projects, large projects, and understanding sort of how the stitches go. But I love that, like, a lot of these figures, you can now start really seeing them coming together. The little, they're angels or cherubs or something up here, you can see them coming together. This is also a great project for supernatural stitches, because in the television show Supernatural, there are frequently episodes with angels in it. And whenever they do, one of the prompts is stitch on something with an angel. So this is a great thing to pull out and do that as well. And because I really like to work on this, I don't work on it every day right now, but I try and get in about 500 stitches a week, a minimum, if not more. I'm almost always working on this one way or another, and so it's a great project to pull out, and whenever that prompt comes up, and just use it as an excuse to put more stitches in it. So that was the 5 projects I worked on for that one particular game in the New Starts. Other projects that I worked on, so this is Evening Romance by Artecy, and this week for Magical Stitches, one of the prompts was to put 250 stitches in something that had a river, whether this is a river or a stream or a creek or a brook. I have no idea, but it's running water. I'm calling it a river. And so that's my story. I'm sticking to it. But anyhow, this is where I am now. This right about here is about the halfway point across the pattern. So you'll see, I don't want to take off the cue snap, but you can see that's the left edge there. And so basically I just put in some of the light brown here and then some of the colors up here. This whole piece is very heavy on confetti, which is not usual for Artecy. She tends to design her patterns so there is less confetti on them. But I think because of the way the light plays in this picture, there's no way but to do it with confetti. And I'm totally fine with confetti. I love the effect that's having on this picture. But it does mean that until you actually get a space done, like here, this is the page before this, you can't really see what you're stitching here until everything is filled in and the picture becomes clearer. This one I also only have a paper copy, so I'm not doing a pattern keeper. So it just takes me a little bit more time to work on it than it does some of the other patterns that I do have electronic files that I can follow more easily, find the symbols. Another one that I worked on was Wise Old Owl by Jess Nan. This one for the June Magazine Monthly Challenge, for the acrostic, the word was swim. One of the letters was W, so I picked up this one. I decided for my acrostic that I wanted to pick things that really stretched what I needed to do, but with the understanding that I might not get the acrostic done, and I'm okay with that. But this is a project I keep feeling like I'm so close to being finished. So here's where I am now. I finished filling in the eyes, brought some of the colors down, got these leaves done. Literally all I need to do is, there's very little left to do on these wings, and then I've got his beak, his feet, and then there's some foliage here, and then the writing in the middle. It's really not a huge amount. I think my goal was to finish this. I'm not sure I will get this done this month, but I might get a little bit close. And what will probably slow me down is that the lettering is 1/1. This is a 25 count linen. It's a really old piece of linen. Let's see if I can take this away. You can see. I think you can sort of see really easily behind it because the holes are quite big. So I don't think doing the 1/1, it won't be challenging, but it will just, you know, slow me down a little bit to make sure that I'm getting everything exactly in the right place. And so I may not get that done, but if I don't, I will pull that out again for July. And when I do my acrostic, and use the O in Jolly, which is the acrostic, and say, okay, take 2 on finishing WIP Old Owl. The primary piece that I was using for the magazine monthly challenge, which the theme was summer, and to me, in the United States, summer means Independence Day. So this is this is a patchwork, Patriotic Patchwork. It says America. It's a little bit hard to read in that picture, but that's what it says. And I had started this last year for Mania and didn't get very far in it. I had part of the A done and that was it. And my goal for this was to get AME done, including all the back stitching. And I met that goal. And then this is the top of the R. So I'm not sure when I will pull this out again, but this is, you know, a very easy stitch. This is a 14 count aida, very easy to work on and to stitch. And I really, you know, something very easy to do when I'm watching something else on TV, or, you know, something that doesn't require a lot of attention. And I know very quickly if I make a mistake, and it's very easy to pull it out, but that really doesn't happen that often because it is so rhythmic, and you put one stitch in the wrong place and it's very clear from the get-go that it's in the wrong place. So that's Patriotic Patchwork. Patriotic Patchwork. I'm still getting used to the Invisalign, and sometimes I feel, you know, that I can't speak as clearly as I should. But anyhow, the next one that I worked on, this is Mirabilia Portrait of Veronica. And yes, I'm still doing the skin 1/1, so it's taking me forever. This was one that I designated as my focus piece last week for Crystal Academy. So I got in, I think I got in well over 750 stitches. I think it was closer to 1,000. But you can start to see here with this dark color here, sort of coming around here. This is the bottom of the skin that you can see on her chest. So there really isn't that much more here. And then what this is here, she's like this with her arm. And so that's why it looks sort of weird here. But when everything is stitched, it will look more normal. So I'm looking forward to getting that part finished, and then moving on and starting to work on the dress. She has her other arm, which is dangling. I will do also 1/1, obviously, but I will have an opportunity to work a little bit on her dress before I get to that, which will be nice and feel like I'm making great progress after feeling like I've been mired in this for a long time. The next one that I worked on was Heaven and Earth Design, Midnight Vigil, artwork by Lisa Parker. And here's where I am now. I pulled this out for, it was for for WIP Go. It was one of my WIP Go pieces, so I need to put a minimum of 1,000 stitches in. And then for Magical Stitches, basically the prompt was pick one of your favorite previous prompts. The prompts, whatever, but I really wanted to work on this piece, and so I use this as an excuse to pull it out and put 1,000 stitches in. So I don't know how many I got put into this for the month of June. I haven't done my totals yet, but well over 1,000. And so basically I worked on this. This is basically all 310 and 3799, so just a lot of patchwork, black and gray. And you know, some of it sort of got pulled down a little bit just to outline the moon a little bit more. But then I came over here, and the reason why I did that was right about here is the halfway point across the entire pattern. So this is obviously the left side, the middle is somewhere here. So that was exciting just to sort of say, okay, when I get this part done, it'll be halfway done across the top. Obviously there's a lot more that comes down, but this is a mini, and so it's much smaller than the normal Hades. But I'm loving the way that it is stitching up, and just how quickly I'm starting to see the picture appear. And then the last piece that I worked on was Cats in the Toy Box, another Heaven and Earth design. This artwork is by Lesley Anne Ivory. So there's a picture of what it is. And I know several thousand stitches since the last time that I showed this to you. So this is now the far right edge. So, sorry, the rest of it's clipped in here. But so I'm over, I think I'm over 22% right now in the whole pattern. So basically I had just been working on the background here, but what you can start to see here, this white space here when I get to it, that is one of the cat's tails that sort of pops up there. So I will get to that shortly. And then also obviously I need to work on the panda's head. I would like to, by the end of July, sort of have most of this space filled up before I move the Q-snap again. But loving working on this project. This is also my extra credit piece for Crystal Academy, which means every 1,000 stitches I just post my progress and get credit for it. Also for 21 and 21 for Full Coverage Fanatics, although I think by the end of this month I will have exceeded the 21,000 stitches for the year. I also use this for cabin building in Magical Stitches. It just gets pulled out a lot, and it's a project that I work on almost every evening, and I really love working on it. So it's quite a large piece. It's about 150,000 stitches, but it's really a lot of fun, and it's sometimes good to have the monotony of doing these stripes all the way down. But then when I say, okay, I want to do something a little bit more intricate, I will start pulling out a color, which is why you can see sort of, I think this is like 647 or 648 here. There's just a little bit in the cat's tail and a little bit of it that sort of came over to define the ear of the koala. And it's just fun to sort of see the cats and the toys come to life in this pattern. So that is all the stitching that I have to share with you. My plans for the next couple of weeks, obviously in the next few days, we will have the next two numbers for WIP Go. WIP Go for me was very easy this month because one of them was cats in the toy box and my goal was 2,000 stitches. I'm already well over 3,000 stitches for the month, and the other one was Midnight Vigil. So I'll see what gets drawn for that. I also will work on, for letters of the month, my two pieces are, I will pull White Owl, which I showed earlier by Artecy, because that was for letters of the month. That's N for, that was actually surprisingly hard for me to have something, but I said it had the night sky featured prominently in that one, and I believe the other one is M, which is Midnight Vigil, which I will pull out again. So both of those will come out. I also will be participating in Semi-Sane Stitchers Bingo, which basically you make your own bingo card ahead of time and put DMC numbers on there. So you have to sort of think about like what numbers am I going to, what colors am I going to be using in my projects for the month of July. So there are some easy things like, almost 310, 3799, 3371. I don't even have to think about it. I have those projects and I can just easily get those numbers. But I know there are some things I am going to be working on that maybe have some numbers that don't appear in all my projects, like White Owl, some of the deep blues, I think like 823 and 839 and 820. Some of those numbers I can put in there, and there's different versions of it, depending on if you do the sane, semi-sane, or insane version. But just a lot of fun to sort of help direct my stitching each day. So I know what I'm going to work on in July, but will help me sort of say, okay, today what do I want to pick up? I also will participate in the Full Coverage Fanatics Bingo. I still have to figure out which projects I will do for that. I usually do the counting version, which is 1,000 stitches on all of that. I do not try for a blackout. First of all, I cannot meet all of the prompts they have in the bingo board, but I try to meet 5 of them in a row, and so it's just where can I find 5 projects that fit that. One of them, a lot of them, it's like, I don't know, pick something with, I don't know, like it's all Olympics related. So I think something is like, pick something with the boat. Well, I don't have any boats in my full coverage, so that box I will never be able to fill. But I will, one way or another, find 5 boxes in a row and free space, so it might only have to be 4, and then the 5th one is there. So we'll see how I can get on that. So lots of things to direct my stitching for July. We'll see where I end up. I also, with Semi-Sane Stitchers this month, have been doing Stitch 'em All Pursuit and Stitch Whammy. I successfully completed the Stitchy Pursuit, which I needed to have about, which you had to, like, basically it was like Trivial Pursuit, but with stitches. But once you completed one game, you were done, and I was kind of glad with that it was only one game because Facebook was not very cooperative. And so it was just really frustrating because you would try and post pictures and then they would somehow disappear. And as frustrating as it was for me, it was much worse for the moderators. So I really do appreciate the moderators and their patience in dealing with all of Facebook's foibles. In the Stitch Whammy, there's the whammy where you can lose all the entries that you have earned. But that to me has been less of a whammy than I'll be like, oh, I'll have 2 spins. And then all of a sudden I have to stitch 1,000 stitches for each of those. And I'm like 2,000 stitches. That's a lot for me in one day. You don't have to do them in one day. You have as long as you want, but you can't get the prompts for the next day until you've shown that you stitched the previous ones. But that's been a lot of fun to play as well. So thank you again to the moderators of Semi-Sane Stitchers for all the really fun games that you create for us. So a little bit of some cross-stitch acquisitions. The first 2 things I got were actually freebies, both from Artecy and the Facebook group for Artecy. She has a lot of freebies that she puts up there. So I downloaded a couple of them this month. This is the first one, and it's just Strasbourg. So lovely full coverage of just picturesque. So I thought that was really pretty. And then the next one from Artecy was Time to Wake Up, with a cute picture of a little dog sort of trying to wake up a little girl. This could be me with my cats. Obviously I'm not that young, and this could be a feline, but this is how I feel every morning when they decide they want to be fed. My printer is not the best, but there is a lot of white in this. It's not as off as it could be. I compared the picture online. This is a little bit whiter than it is, but it is, there's not a lot of detail that's missing here. But I thought this was a cute one as well. And then I've seen so many people work on this, and I know that in 2022 I definitely want to start this one. So I purchased it, and this is Anzac by Long Dogs Samplers. So I had the opportunity to go to Australia about 15 years ago on vacation, and I absolutely loved it. I'm not sure if and when I'm going to get a chance to go again. Obviously, I'm not going to be traveling to Australia or internationally anytime soon, but I just found so much fun stuff and so much nature and just so much to take advantage of in Australia. And as soon as someone showed this pattern, I don't know, when I saw a year and a half ago or something, I'm like, I want that. So I finally went ahead and bought it. And I need fabric for it, but I am going to do a monochromatic version of this, and I have some sulky thread, a very deep blue, that I'm going to do this in. Other things that I purchased or acquired, I got this. This was a giveaway I won from Michelle from Bendy Stitches, Bendy Stitchy. So this is just a little shepherd's bush pattern. I'll see if I can get a little bit closer there. But it's basically, it is quite small, but it's just specialty stitches. So it'll be a cute little one to work on. It is quite small, but just a chance to practice some specialty stitches. And then from her D-Stash page, I purchased, or from her, she periodically runs live D-Stash sales, and so I was able to get this. This is a kit. It's called Friend Stitch, and I want to say it's Heart and Hand and Bent Creek, but I can't 100% be sure. But there's sort of 2 patterns in there, and it is a kit, so it's got the fabric, the floss, and then there are some buttons that go in there. So again, another good thing to have whenever new starts. 2021 is over, and they actually, for that group, they are going to have like a Startapalooza or whatever they're going to call it. I think they're trying to call it the 12 Days of Christmas, but it will be from like mid-December until the end of the year. All the starts that we couldn't do during the year, we can start them at the end of the year. So I have a lot of things either kitted up or sort of saying possibilities for the next year. So that is all for the stitching. If that's all you're here for, thank you. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you liked what you saw and hit subscribe. And you can also follow what I do on Instagram. I'm also Owl and Gator Stitcher there. I don't post as often as I would like to, but that is a great way to get a hold of me through DM if you don't want to leave something in the comment box below. But moving on to what I'm reading, I've had a very good couple of weeks with my reading. So actually the first thing was an audiobook, and it was The Raven Boys by Maggie, I want to say Stiefvater. I don't know exactly how to pronounce her last name. But it's a young adult book that takes place in what I call Old Virginia. It's modern day, but I lived in Northern Virginia for many years, and Old Virginia is very different from Northern Virginia. Not good or bad, it's just different. And there's a lot, people in Northern Virginia, a lot of people tend to be migrants, for lack of a better word, from other parts of the United States, whereas people in sort of Old Virginia tend to have generations who lived in the same place. But anyhow, this is a book that takes place, it's a group of boys who attend private school, and then a teenage girl, and then her family. Her family has a lot of psychics. She is not a psychic, but she's the kind of person who has the ability to amplify psychic powers. I've tried to read a number of young adult fantasy because I see people who just rave about how wonderful these books are. I mean, just generically. And so I'm like, and they all tend to be like trilogies or books of 5 or whatever. And people are so excited by it that I'm like, I want to read these books. I want to read them. And then I'm like, ugh, I don't like it. And this, I think, was the exception to that. And I think part of the reason why I liked this one better, and good quality writing and all of that. But I think where I have a problem is where you have fantasy or even young adult books that aren't fantasy, but where, the teenagers are going to save the world. And I don't like films where, some really obnoxious person is always right and the other people are always wrong and they're the ones who are going to save the world. I'm not huge on superhero movies and things like that. And I think that what I enjoyed about this was these are people who, I don't want to say, they were on a hunt for something, for some magical power, and it was about their search for that, and very interesting to sort of the relationships between all of the people, and the narrator of the book was Will Patton, who I think not as well known as other actors, but I know him best from Remember the Titans. He was one of the white football coaches in that film. Denzel played the black coach, and that took place in Northern Virginia. And I actually know the high school. I drove by the high school many times where that took place, T.C. Williams High School. And so it was just sort of, so that film, and always seems to be on TNT whenever you turn it on. So film I've seen, maybe not the whole thing through many times, but have seen snippets of it through many times, and it's very well acted and written. So anyhow, Will Patton, who is in that, did this book, and he naturally has a slight Southern accent. And so he was just able to, because he's such a talented actor, he was able to voice so many of the characters so well. So that was The Raven Boys. And then the next book I read was An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. This one, I believe, the Women's Book for Fiction a couple of years ago. It was offered also an Oprah book selection. I enjoyed it, but it was a very difficult read. It is basically about a young black couple, and they both are quite successful. She comes from a family where her father got a patent for something, and so she was raised quite well off. And he was someone who came from a very poor family, but was quite intelligent, and got himself through school. And despite all the odds, he beat it, and he had a very successful career. They meet, they get married. But all of that sort of happens as a prelude to the book. Basically what happens is that they are visiting his family in Louisiana, and they're staying at a motel, and a woman accuses him of rape. And from the book itself, you know that he is not guilty of this crime, that the woman who accused him, they had met and they had had a conversation while they're getting ice from the ice machine. But but then basically he went back to the room after that, and he was with his wife the whole night, and the woman said that he came to her room later and raped her. But that, like, so the fact that he goes to jail, so because she comes from a wealthy family, one of her uncles, I think, is an attorney, and he spends a lot of time trying to get him out of jail. That is sort of the backstory almost, because that's, and I don't want to minimize what happened, but it's really meant to be a look at their marriage and how the impact of two people who are, you know, very much on the same page, and what happens when something that ends up in their marriage and they both know he didn't do, you know, he was not, you know, this wasn't like he was, you know, out at a hotel somewhere and maybe there's a question in the back of her mind. Like, she knows he is innocent of this crime. But just sort of how the impact of him being in jail and them being apart, how that impacts their marriage, and what happens when he does finally get out. And so very, very well written, but obviously very difficult to read, both because a man was wrongly convicted of a crime, but then also watching a marriage unravel and, you know, or seemingly unravels, and what happens. So I enjoyed reading the book, but it was a difficult read. So after I finished that, I'm like, I need something light and fluffy, because I have been doing a lot of heavy reading for the past month or so. So I picked up this one, and most of my books I either have on Kindle or they're library books. Actually, they're all on Kindle. But this one I did have a hard copy of. This is called Very Sincerely Yours by Kayomi Harai. And it's a contemporary romance, fairly easy to read. It's the standard story where, basically first chapter, the woman is basically, she's got a long-term living boyfriend, and the boyfriend basically dumps her and kicks her out. She thinks they're going to get married. And she then, you know, she's obviously devastated, and she's now got to figure out what she wants to do with her life. And then there's a man, and she wants, he basically is sort of like a Mr. Rogers at a local television show that he produces, and they're in Columbus, Ohio. And basically, he takes letters from children, and she decides to write him a letter, and they start an email correspondence, and like everything else, you know, they get thrown together, and they meet each other, and what happens to the relationship. You know, we all know how it's going to end, but it's always fun to have the journey, see the journey. And she was the character. The interesting thing was she was a character who had made her whole life around her boyfriend, and so, you know, and he's a doctor, and she did everything for him. She only cooked 5 meals because those were the only 5 things that he liked, and she didn't spend much time with her friends because he didn't like them, and all those kinds of things. So he wasn't, you know, he wasn't abusive, he wasn't isolating, but he said, like, she had a small life. She worked in a toy store, a vintage toy store, because it was just easier to have those kinds of hours and to support him. And all of a sudden she gets herself like, what I want to be with my life, do with my life. And you know what's going to happen is they're going to meet, they're going to fall in love, but before they have a chance to develop their relationship, what's going to happen, you know, something's going to physically drive them apart, and what's going to happen with their relationship. And it's just, you know everything's going to happen, but you don't know how they're going to resolve it in the end. But it's a romance, you know, it's going to have a, they end up, you know, whether it's married or proposed or whatever else, you know, they're going to end up together in the end. But, you know, again, fun just to watch them going. So if you're looking for that kind of book, I do recommend Very Sincerely Yours by Kayomi Harai. So that's sort of it that I've been reading. I have a few other things that I'm in the middle of right now, and I can report back on them next time if they're good, if I recommend them. But in terms of what I've been watching, so this is a comedy on a Chuck Lorre comedy, and Chuck Lorre, if you know the name, but you can't really put a finger on it. Probably most famous for like 2.5 Men and The Big Bang Theory and Mom and a ton of other sort of sitcoms that like every Thursday, I think he just dominates Monday and Thursday night. But he had one that came out, and it's a shortened season this year, obviously, because they weren't doing a huge amount of filming, but it's called The United States of Al. And it is about basically a guy who is a former Marine who had done multiple tours in Afghanistan, and I worked very closely with an Afghan translator, and basically worked to, supported getting him out of Afghanistan to the United States. And it's Chuck Lorre. He's very good about getting his finger on sort of the pulse of sort of what's, using comedy, but what are some of the issues that people are facing? Like, I hated 2.5 Men. I just thought it was like toilet humor and didn't like the character, like neither, quite frankly, I didn't like any of the characters in that. I sadly identified most with the next door neighbor, Rose, who was wackadoodle. Sorry if that offends anyone, but like, she was the most likable character, and that she wasn't very likable. But that's neither here nor there. But I think he has developed a more likable character since then, at least in my opinion. But basically, it is a comedy, but it touches on a number of things. Most notably, you have someone who's come back from multiple tours in Afghanistan. He's now out of the Marines, but he, doesn't really have his life together. He had been married. He has a daughter. But his marriage fell apart, because he just couldn't relate to the day-to-day of coming back and having that kind of life. Obviously he has a daughter. They all live in the same town, and his daughter is, she's like 10. She's a part of his life. But, the fact that she basically not just lived without her father, but her father was overseas for much of her childhood. And, she never knew if he was going to come home because he was in a war zone. And then also the issue with translators. And they do periodically, the two lead actors do on a couple of times. They have a clip from them at the very end of the show where they're out of character. But as you know, especially now with the U.S. pulling our troops out of Afghanistan, a lot of the translators worked for the U.S. military with the understanding that if they did their jobs well, that would open up a path for them to get an immigrant visa to the United States. And they are in real danger if they remain in Afghanistan. And so, simply because they might be seen as abetting the U.S. troops. And unfortunately, some of it is just bureaucracy, some of it is COVID, but there have been a lot of reasons, and now as the U.S. troops are pulling out, and a lot of these translators who had some protections will no longer have them, but they're sort of stuck in this like bureaucratic system where they can't get the approvals they need to get their immigrant visas to come to the United States. As someone who worked for the U.S. government and who was a visa adjudicator, it was a while ago, and certainly never in a place like Afghanistan or Iraq, but nonetheless did work on adjudicating visa cases. I understand that it's complex, and it's not the people who are at the front line who are just being difficult and not doing their jobs. There's a lot of things, focusing on background checks and security issues and all sorts of things that we need to make sure the people who are getting visas are people who meet the requirements to get them, and those requirements are set by Congress. So it's not a simple solution, and it's not just one thing that you can put your finger on and say, okay, if this one person does this, everything will be okay. How do you support the people who helped you while at the same time ensuring the U.S.'s security? It's a complex question. Probably not the best question to address at the end of a Flosstube, but I find the show very compelling because it is comedy and a lot of it is about culture clashes. But when we first saw the ads for it, my husband and I were like, oh, it's going to be a fine line to walk. And I think, there are some issues that probably are a fine line to walk. But I think Chuck Lorre does a good job. And they sort of showing multiple sides of the issues. So if you have a chance, just pop it on. I think it's on Thursday nights if you can't get it streaming, and just watch an episode or two if you get a chance. So that is all that I have to share with you today. Thank you for watching. And once again, thank you to everyone who has left comments and subscribed and liked the video. I really appreciate it. And happy stitching, everyone, and I will see you in a couple of weeks. Bye.